Hi, this is Dave Gahary from the Dave and Duke Call-In Show. Just stopping in to wish all of our listeners a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. 2024 is shaping up to be a much better year than this year, if you can believe it. We certainly are making ground, thanks to you. See you next year.
You're listening to Speak Free Radio, the free speech internet radio platform.
Good evening, everyone. This is Charles Lincoln from New Orleans. Today is Tuesday, the 26th of December, second day of Christmas, known traditionally as the Feast of Stephen, as in, good King Wenceslas went out on the Feast of Stephen, and the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Needless to say, there's no snow in New Orleans, but it's still a very, very nice second day of Christmas, and I'm happy to introduce to you a friend I just made on Christmas. He was introduced to me by the producer of this channel and show, Dave Gahary, and his name is Troy Scheffler, and I'm guessing that where you are, there is snow deep and crisp and even. Am I right?
Well, sir, you would be absolutely wrong. It's been raining like torrentially the last week. It's almost ominous. It's insane. I've never seen this before. Anyone I've talked to up here. I'm in like the northern end of Minnesota, and there hasn't been any snow, just rain all week.
Are you anywhere near the town of Credit River?
No, in fact, I don't know where Credit River is. It's a small town somewhere around here, but in fact, I should probably look it up on a map. But
basically,
not my county.
Until recently, Minnesota was like this all white, boring, mostly Scandinavian population. People who had left one cold climate for another, and it had a very strong libertarian streak to it. I believe, obviously Jerome Daley was part of that in the 1960s and in the Credit River opinion, and that made him into a very minor celebrity in the Federal Reserve and income tax protest movement. And then you had more recently you had Jesse Ventura. Tell me, what is Minnesota like now?
Well, Minnesota politically has always been pretty schizophrenic. It's always all over the board. I mean, like you said, we went from Jesse Ventura to a neoconservative Tim Pawlenty. Then we had Mark Dayton, and now we have Tim Walz, which is unfortunately, but yeah, it's as far as what happened to Minnesota, as far as the decline of it. That diversity is really what happened to it.
That's basically the Clintons did that to Minnesota, right? It was Bill and Hillary Clinton who ordered the mass importation of Somalis, right?
It's hard to say if it was. I think it was a mix between the Clintons and the Obama administration. But yeah, it was a huge dump of Somalis that we got, and then we had a huge dump of Hmongs too, which are an interesting people also.
I don't know any. Those are Vietnamese or something?
If you mention it to a Vietnamese man, they would like literally get enraged right in front of your face if you mention them. No, they are despised by all Asians. They're kind of a nomadic type people that just wander around and don't assimilate at all.
HMONG, you're saying, right?
Yeah, yes.
And they immigrated as a result of the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah, that's that they got immigration status through that. Yeah.
And so what do they do? I mean, if they wander around, they can't stay around and cause trouble. So
Well, now they have a paycheck just sitting around, and so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, of course, I can always say, and everyone always can say, not all, but they've definitely brought an interesting climate to the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. I mean, you see pigs running around in yards, you got corn growing. I mean, this is the middle of the city. And so then there's always these cultural clashes. But the most interesting thing that I find about them is that they're very prone to gangs. So as far as the other demographics that cause problems in Minneapolis and St. Paul, they're definitely giving them a run for their money.
but you don't live in Minneapolis, St. Paul. You said you live in the far north end.
I live about 2.5 hours north now, but for most of my life, I lived around the inner ring around the cities.
So you must practically live in Canada then.
Not too far. Yeah, I think it'd maybe take me another hour or two to get up to Canada.
Okay. Well, anyhow, tell us. I'm just doing geography trivia. Why don't you tell us about yourself? Because uh, talking to you just briefly yesterday, you're obviously one of us.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. I would find myself in the sphere. I hope the sphere turns into an actual movement soon, but I like to consider it a sphere right now. I think everyone's starting to figure out that there needs to be more organization behind it. So we can
The
actually,
Earth is a sphere, and the Earth moves, but it took a long time for things to get going.
amen, amen. Uh, but yeah, I mean, as far as my history is concerned, I've been, I guess, demographically aware since I was a little child. Um, Again, if you're not familiar at all with Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's a northern suburb called Brooklyn Center. And it's right next to Brooklyn Park. And bringing up Jesse Ventura, he was actually kind of the hero at the time. He was trying to stave off the demographic replacement going on. But Brooklyn Center became the first uh, um, majority non-white city in the state of Minnesota, and it was a northern suburb of Minneapolis, and it actually was the center of like commerce of all the northern suburbs. It was a big deal. I used to go there as a child all the time, and it was a lot of fun shopping. You go to the shopping centers, but then the demographic change happened, and of course the decay set in. But what they were doing in Brooklyn Center is the exact same mistake in cancer that destroys literally every city, state, county, country. Well, I shouldn't say country, this country, but Section 8 housing. And they just started building it everywhere in Brooklyn Center because, of course, the state and the feds were just dumping all this grant money on them. They're like, oh my God, all this free money to build all these, the taxes we're going to get out of it. And yeah, it absolutely destroyed that city. Well, at the same time they were doing that, Jesse Ventura was mayor of Brooklyn Park. And so the cancer started spreading in. And it's kind of interesting right now when Ventura got in, he put a kibosh to it right away. They said, nope, we've already destroyed half the city. And so right now you have basically a black area of the city, an Asian area of the city, and then a white area of the city. And I'm sure you can imagine which part you would want to live in. It's pretty dangerous in certain sections.
If people would adhere to their sections, it might not be so bad, right? I mean, uh,
That's the problem. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember the story that happened a couple of years ago. I believe her name was Kim Potter. She's a police officer for Brooklyn Park, and she was the one that accidentally shot that kid, but when she thought she was pulling her taser. It seems like all these national news stories come from Minnesota. If it's not George Floyd, it's Kim Potter or Philando Castile or you
what
name
were
it.
you going to say about her?
Oh, she actually worked in Brooklyn Park, so it's just constant chaos there. And I mean,
Was
I
it
feel
was it
for
the was it the center of the George Floyd business?
well, I mean, Minneapolis was the epicenter, and it obviously just went all over the place and started spreading into the suburbs. To be honest, it didn't. I think they're still a little intimidated at the time going out into the suburbs. I mean, Minnesotans are. I mean, they really value hunting and fishing, so there's a lot of guns around here. So I think they're a little nervous on going out there, and even the areas that are Democratic voting, they still value their Second Amendment because they hunt.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, in my area, it's highly Republican, but yeah, absolutely everyone has guns, and I mean, you hear gunshots going off all the time, and but we're able to shoot in our yards up here because it's a rural area. But yeah, it didn't really go into the suburbs at the time, but after the riot subsided, then they're emboldened because nothing happened to them. So now they're starting to go into the direct suburbs. I mean, places that I used to grow up, and very nice in once affluent areas. They're well, still affluent areas. They're going in and doing a lot of carjackings, and I mean the crimes just off the scales. You have 6% of the population committing over 60% of the murders. I mean, it's not even the 1250 rule here. It's the 660 rule. And that's just for murder. Then as far as the robbery rate, it's way higher. And of course, the majority of victims are white, and so on and so forth. Almost all the carjackings and home invasions. The carjackings are a real big problem around here too. Well, not around my place, but down in Minneapolis and St. Paul, it just happens constantly, and the news just kind of threw their hands up, and it's not even news anymore.
In 1979, I've been to Minneapolis 3 times, I believe. 79, 81, and like 86, 86 or 87 or something. And I don't remember seeing a single black person. I remember noticing, wow, there are no minorities here.
Yeah, wasn't it nice? Wasn't it nice? Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, when I was a kid and first got my license, I remember driving down to the city. I can't remember what we are going to do. We are going to go to an arcade or something like that down there. And just some black guy just jumped in the back of our car and was just like, "Hey, you want to buy some pot?" And I mean, we just turned 16. It's like, what are you doing in the car here, dude? I mean, it was so natural. And yeah. And then the cracks started coming in, and they complain
So
as
what year was that? What year was that happened?
That would have been 92, I suppose.
Okay.
But that was about the area too where Minneapolis got the nickname Murderapolis, where I mean our murder rate. In fact, a fact is that our robbery rate in Minneapolis is worse than Chicago. People have no idea what's going on in Minneapolis. It's insane. I don't go down. I avoid it like the plague. If I have to go down there, obviously I'm armed. And I rarely go down there.
Oh my God. Well, that's horrible.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was beautiful up here.
Anyhow, so what do you do? Tell me a little bit about yourself. And you're apparently kind of like me in some ways. You're an attorney outlaw.
Well, my story essentially, after graduation, I actually wanted to be a cop initially. Go figure that one. But then I got caught up in a little too much youthful exuberance in college, and ended up getting some DUIs. And yeah, that didn't turn out very well for wanting to go down that career path. So I started going into a major of psych and criminal justice. Then that transferred into pre-law. And after that, I went into a grad program for public administration and nonprofits, just to kind of see how the government, because I was kind of getting into politics at the time, and I kind of want to see how the enemy operated their institutions.
You had already identified the enemy.
Oh yeah, I was trying to start racial defense groups back in high school. In fact, it's funny. Was I talking to you yesterday when I showed you this book, the Fiery Cross?
You told me about it, but that's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, it was a little
And
playbook.
you said that you said that you got that from the library,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it was for a high school project, and it inspired you to start your own group.
Yeah. Well, again, it's people didn't like the physical fitness requirements, and the way I look right now, I guess I probably wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't want them now, but oh boy. But yeah, they didn't like the physical fitness requirements. It's like, well, if you're going to be a group and you're going to be, open and you're going to want to be able to embrace your other people, well, you're going to need to be able to fight people off because you're going to be a target, and you're going to have to again help out.
This was in the 1990s then.
Yeah, it would have been 1990, and then I believe it was 91 where a lot of people wish they would have listened to me and started building some sort of defense, because my school was like 100% white. But like I said, I started seeing all these changes when I was 5 going on around Brooklyn Center and everything. And so I saw it coming. I mean, I was seeing patterns. And then in 1991, Minnesota passed the open enrollment law to where any kid from outside a district, it used to be you had to live inside the district to go to that district schools. Well, they passed a law to where anyone could switch around. So you had a lot of the Black demographic from Minneapolis just plop into my school district because they had already ruined all their schools down there. I mean, it's amazing that everything's so veiled around here, because I don't know if you ever heard the term Minnesota nice.
Well, it's probably related to Canada nice, right? I mean, the Canadians are supposedly so nice, and maybe it's cold climates. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's not Minnesota nice at all. It's Minnesota passive aggressive. It's Minnesota fake. People that move in here, it's like, what are you guys doing? Just, I mean, be honest about stuff. And it's like, I know, but it is what it is. But I mean, it's always like this constant cover up of like what's actually festering. And so like even just a couple of years ago, actually it might even been last year. It seems like every year the teachers are always wanting to go on strike because they want more money. Well, what do they want more money for? Well, they want more money for security. And it's like, well, wait. And the nurses were just on strike for the same thing. It's like, why do teachers and nurses need more money for security where they work? Well, once again, this particular demographic has, I mean, again, the violence is off the scale.
So teachers and nurses are both being assaulted and raped?
Oh yeah, left and right, all the time. It's incredible. And again, we're looked at as this just innocent state that, everything's going great. No, it's not. It's not even kind of.
Well, now hang on. You've got one of the worst congressmen coming from Minnesota. Is that Rahid? What's her name?
Oh, are you talking about Ilhan Omar?
Ilhan Omar. That's right.
Yeah,
Rahid is another one. That's well, she's one
yeah.
of the
Rashid, I can't remember what state she's out of, but yeah, Ilhan Omar is, or she must be out of Michigan, with my guess, Dearborn. If I threw a shot in the dark, but yeah, Ilhan Omar. I mean, she is what she is. I mean, again, as they say, demographics are destiny. And well, I mean, and another thing that's interesting is now it's starting to go around as a meme to where there's a province in Somalia, because we're having to change our state flag now, because our old one is racist because it has in Native American. I've always found that term funny because it's a misnomer in its own right. I mean, how can you be a Native American when we named America? I mean, it just doesn't even make sense. But anyhow, I digress. But yeah, they
let me abos go loose, Bruce.
But it's amazing. They're just like, oh no, that's racist. We need to change that. I mean, we're renaming lakes because those are.
What's the flag going to be? I mean, what are they going to do?
Oh yeah, okay. So there's a province in Somalia that the flag looks just like it. It looks like it should be at a fair, not like a dignified state flag. I mean, if it was at a fair, it's like, okay, well, yeah, okay, it's kind of flashy, whatever, but it's not dignified at all. Yeah, I mean, you can check it out.
I've just got to see. We'll call it a proposed new flag.
Yeah, no, I guess they decided on it, that it's gonna happen.
The final design pictured above includes a conceptual shape of Minnesota in dark blue with a white 8-pointed star pointing to the top of the flag. The rest of the flag is in light blue. Okay, then this is Minnesota's new flag, Fox 9. Okay, I'm trying to look at it. This is horrible. Go on. Okay. Oh, I see. That's very vaguely the shape of Minnesota. Very vaguely. Looks like a K, basically.
But yeah, I mean, our old flag was great. I mean, it actually was very inclusive. Like a lot of people should have appreciated in the contemporary era. But it yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. But because there's a white guy on a horse, I believe, and some Indian was plowing a field or something, that it was like, oh my God, this is horrible. But yeah, there's another lake around the Twin Cities named Lake Calhoun, and they're like, oh, Calhoun, he owned a slave or something, so we got to get rid of that too. I mean, it's insane. They're renaming all the schools.
Hang on, that it was actually named after Vice President Calhoun.
Well, if your history is better than mine on that, we'll go with that.
Well, Vice President Calhoun was really one of the towering figures of the early 19th century, the early republic. He, along with Daniel Webster and Henry Clay, they were called the Great Debaters. They were three senators. Calhoun was from South Carolina. Henry Clay was from Kentucky. Daniel Webster was from Massachusetts. Daniel Webster was a Federalist / Whig. Henry Clay was basically sort of a moderate Whig. Whigs were the centralists, the predecessors to the Republican Party, and the Democrats at that point were the states' rights Southern Party. And Calhoun was an advocate of what was called nullification, and he was basically the apostle of states' rights in the 19th century. But despite the fact that he was from South Carolina, he did his entire education at Yale, and Calhoun has the distinction of being the only vice president to serve under two different presidents. He served under John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson's first term. Andrew Jackson replaced him for his second term because Andrew Jackson was more of a centralist than Calhoun, and they had a big fight. And Jackson is reputed to have said his only regret in life was he didn't hang Calhoun, but Calhoun was so prominent in the early 19th century and considered such a great intellectual and a constitutional scholar that until like 5 years ago, the major undergraduate male residence at Yale University was Calhoun College.
Okay. Well, this is way more than I ever learned, even around Lake Calhoun, because at the time I was just chasing girls, man. I mean, that's what Lake Calhoun was known for, and that was about it. So now it's like
presumably only in the summer.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, I mean, if give it a shot, look up the new name. I couldn't even. It's like Minna Zigga Diggy Itchy. I don't even know how to even pronounce it. Nobody does. Everyone still just calls it Lake Calhoun.
This is fascinating. Calhoun, Minnesota. Bidmakaska.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, whatever.
and so that's right in the middle of the city.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, hi, how you doing? Yep, that's
God, I had not heard of that. That's fascinating.
Oh no, everything's like a complete nightmare, and it's interesting because all like the rural areas are getting really frustrated. There's a lot of the white people are getting really frustrated, but like everywhere, the establishment gets so entrenched, and when I say establishment, not only do you have the establishment, but yeah, it's largely the same people that we always have a problem with behind the establishment and pulling the strings. So it's
People
it's
people who typically wear funny little hats.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think they still have like their holiday is still going on right now. But yeah, I think the longest sitting Congressperson was yeah, she was I think she actually was in Ilhan Omar's district. She was in there like for 80 years, and so she ushered in a lot of the diversity. There was another small hat that was really into construction. I can't recall his name, but he ended up doing all the housing projects. So he kind of hustled this deal with other small hats that were in with the government, and then worked it out where he would get all the money building all these houses, and that's how all the blacks started moving into Minneapolis. And I mean, there was riots like right out the start.
I went to the opening of the museum that's right by the park, the Bakken Museum. That's right by what used to be Calhoun,
Well,
and now they renamed it.
yeah. Again, I mean, even in my area, the high school started an auditorium here, and they came up with a Mida Zinazichi or something, I think it's called. And it's like, what are we doing? I mean, there aren't any Indians in our school. It's like 100% white. Why are we pandering? This is insanity to me. But
Well, and also
there's
there,
so much virtue signaling.
any Indian who's still around probably doesn't speak that language.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, they got their casinos around here, and that's fine. But yeah, haven't you made it to the Mall of America?
No, I never have.
Oh yeah,
It
well, if
sounds,
you want to hang out with Somalians, go right there. And I mean, did you hear about the story? Here's another. This is the level of violence that like people just won't step up to and demand that their sheriffs, their police chiefs, in the state law enforcement acknowledge. It's all over in their data. If you look at Minnesota crime data, it's very comprehensive, especially when it comes down to demographics. I mean, they compile everything, and they have them in nice, neat graphs and everything else to show. I mean, it's just off the charts, like I said. Um, but the Mall of America, you might have heard the story. It was national news for like a blip. There was a black fella that decided just to take a kid. I mean, there's multiple floors, obviously.
oh, he
in
threw
there.
him. He threw
Yeah,
him off the.
exactly. Yeah, threw
Ah,
him
yes,
off
I did.
the
I
top
did
floor.
hear that.
Yeah, he survived. He survived. It was a miracle that the kid survived. But yeah, I mean, it was just
What
there
happened
was
to the guy
zero
who did it?
outrage.
Well,
He
did
went to
they
jail, but
did
yeah, and
like for
who
2 weeks or
knows?
something?
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. There was just another case that there was a younger fella. I think he was 18 when it happened. He murdered some like 15-year-old white kid that was just walking back from work, and then a black judge just said, I'm going to quit you. And I don't even know how that works. I mean, okay, I can see dismiss a charge or something like that. But yeah, the judge, I guess it might have been a bench trial. I didn't look into it too much, but yeah, it was just, yeah, I'm just going to let you go. I guess you sat long enough in county jail. It is insane here. It's insane. People have no idea, and it's going really fast. If there's ever going to be any sort of like tinderbox and first spark that sets off any sort of actual civil war or racial conflict, it's definitely going to be the state. Definitely.
Wow. Well, I mean, I guess that you've got the precedent there because it almost did what 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it will happen again. It will happen again. And every one of so in Minnesota, you have obviously Minneapolis and St. Paul, but you have all these other satellite cities that are hubs that have really smaller suburbs like Rochester or Duluth, you probably heard of, St. Cloud. And then I live right outside of Brainerd. And the Brainerd Baxter area is basically the last bastion of being white. They've completely diversified everywhere else.
Wow.
And of course, I ran for a commissioner seat last year, and I knew it was coming. But yeah, now next year they're going to be building a bunch of apartment complexes. So it's guaranteed going to be a bunch of Section 8 and all the spillover from St. Cloud, which is just like around an hour, a little over an hour away. Guaranteed they're going to come in. And Duluth is going to do the same thing. they're going to dump all their extras on here, kind of like they did their methadone clinic. Yeah, it's a shame, but whatever. I mean,
how did you campaign for commissioner? And I mean, because a lot of people say that the the white people should try to move locally before they move at the state or national level. But what was your campaign like?
it was going really well. I mean, it was going awesome. I was crushing the 20-year incumbent. Well, I guess at the time, a 16-year incumbent. But the Republican Party and people want to blame Democrats for all this mess. It's actually the Republicans, because they're the controlled opposition that will always be the ones that will frustrate people like us from making that next step. So they'll give them this little opportunity. Okay, we'll be a little pressure relief valve or pressure release valve every now and again. But if you do want to make that next step, they will crush you and then just tamp you down to make sure you're just kind of Normieville still. Yeah, each and every time I ran for politics twice, and both times it was my own party that backstabbed me. But yeah.
Now tell me how it worked, because I mean, basically, I think you're 1,000% right. It was Ronald Reagan who allowed the first major amnesty of illegal aliens. Ronald Reagan was actually the first person who had a black woman singing the Star Spangled Banner at his inauguration. And then Daddy Bush 41, he was the one who really not coined, but popularized the phrase New World Order. And now they call us a conspiracy theorist if we say there's a New World Order coming in. But it was the President of the United States who popularized that phrase and said, wow, this is great, folks. We're going to have a New World Order. Anyhow, I mean, it's just, it's pretty amazing. Then W. Bush, the supposed war on terrorism somehow turned into an invitation to have millions of Arabs and Somalis come into the United States.
Right. Well, let alone, I mean, you forgot that Reagan built 12 nuclear power plants for China that completely destroyed our economy, and Kissinger, of course, was behind much of that. I mean, our industrial base just collapsed and obviously skyrocketed China's. So it was definitely a globalist type maneuver. Another thing to add with George Bush is that he was in I can't remember what they called it, but we need to put all the blacks in housing, which was the impetus of the housing crisis in 2008. Between him and Clinton, they started that lending program. So then they were just throwing out no doc loans to everyone. And then, of course, all the blacks took all the loans, and they were the first to default. That was another thing to add to my, I guess, background, is I was a bill collector for many years. I even collected for the U.S. Treasury. And so I've seen pretty much everything, worked for many law firms, everything else. They never pay their bills, like literally ever. The only time you'll see them pay a bill is if they're forced into it from a lender, like they want a mortgage, and then all of a sudden the lender calls you up and says, "Okay, how do we settle this bill? Because I can't get this pushed through unless it's paid." And then they will pay. Otherwise, I was in collections for probably 10 years, and I never collect a bill. And people would ask me, well, how do you do so well at this job? Well, I don't bother with this demographic ever. I'll just skip the account. I mean, if you see something in Detroit or Gary or something like that, I skip it. And it's so bad. I mean, I don't know, this is probably going on a little tangent, but
no, it's fascinating. You're great.
One thing that people really, really need to start paying attention to is the level of fraud. I mean, you hear this and people are like, oh yeah, I heard this story, that story, and oh man, there's $1 billion in fraud. No, there's hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud going on all the time, and it's all diversity based all the time. And one of the biggest scams when I was working for Treasury, and yes, I ran into politicians. There's a lot of black politicians that I ran across, like Charlie Rangel was one of them, where they'd work out this hustle where they would get a grant approved and then give it to their cousin. And then like the midnight basketball court would never get built, and then the money would disappear. So then go to my boss and say, well, I mean, they clearly hustled this money and defrauded taxpayers. What do you do about it? Oh, well, I will take care of it. Here, you don't worry about that. Work the next account. And it's like, okay, whatever. But this happened. The worst though is how in fact I'll tell you two examples of how just crummy the government is to veterans and how they're just so benevolent to diversity. So my main accounts that I end up working were veteran overpayments, to where, say, you're collecting a military pension and they just happen to make a little error to where they're giving you an extra like $1.25 a month, and you're collecting that extra $1.25 and you weren't supposed to get it. It was an overpayment. But how would you ever know this? And I mean, you're just collecting the thing. You don't know what the set rate is. You're just going to cash the thing. It's probably getting direct deposited anyhow into your bank account. Well, after 20 years of doing that, then the government will be like, well, oh, oops, we've been overpaying you that money there. Thanks for serving Israel or whatever. You owe us $22,000 in overpayment and interest and all this stuff. And you got these old guys. I mean, they're in their 80s and 90s on their deathbed with cancer. And I'm supposed to call them up and zap their bank account? I mean, it was insane. I'll tell you this, and I think I'm past statute of limitations to be able to tell you this anyhow, is every single one of those accounts that I ever ran across, because it was the same story. It was a white guy that served his country or served Israel, whatever you want to call it. They thought they were serving their country. I would end up taking that account and you could set it to the next review date, and I'd place it out to like 2024. So it just get lost in the interwebs or whatever, cyberspace, and you'd never see it. So by the time anyone ever see it again, well, the gentleman that they wanted me to hustle out of money that they screwed up on was already dead. So they were vehement about that. I mean, there was other collectors that would, and we had the power to literally, without a judgment or anything, just zap a bank account. You could just take all the money out, boom, and then they had to file to get the money back, and then go through. I mean, it's much like civil. It's civil forfeiture. It's around that. In fact, I can't even remember the term that they used for it. But
I thought that basically you had to consent to that kind of collection in your original account or something.
No. The federal government is the federal government. They will take the money, and then you gotta chase them back after it. And then, of course, you're spending all that money.
Basically saying for a tax refund, like you have for a tax refund, you can't get an injunction against tax collecting, but you can sue for a tax refund.
And in fact, it was called an administrative garnishment. So you would go in and again, literally take all the money out of their account. I worked for other banks where it was different. Yeah, you consented that if it was in the same bank and you had a bank account that you owed the bank, then you could just all of a sudden take the money out. But yeah, the federal government has a lot more power. And I don't, again, I never did that either, because I believe people have due process, and it just taking people's money, especially over a mistake that the government made, is just unconscionable to me. I just couldn't do it. But then another thing that they just overlooked all the time was Medicare overpayment. And this is where all the fraud comes in. And so what would end up happening, this is a hustle, and it's off the charts fraud. I can't even exaggerate this at all, is that you get all these non-whites that are coming into the country, and then they open an LLC, and then they say it's a medical supply company. And then they'll bill Medicare over and over and over again for like the same wheelchair. And this is how insane the billing went, is that Medicare would just keep sending out a check until the end of the year. And then they would say, oh, oops, we just overpaid you, like literally $1.2 million overpayment. Could you refund that money? Well, Muhammad is now back to Somalia or wherever. You would never find them. They're always gone. And I'm not kidding about the Muhammad either. I remember I call this house, And I'm like, and I'm looking at the screen. I'm like, is this a typo? And I'm like, is it Muhammad there? And the guy is, oh yeah, you're looking for Muhammad. I'm like, yeah, Muhammad. Oh, which Muhammad? I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? How many Muhammads are there's 6 Muhammads here? I'm like, whatever. This okay. And again, I hung up the phone. It's like, this is a joke. There's no way. True story, man. Oh, it's a nightmare, and people won't even touch it. The government does not care at all. It's a reality because they don't want it. They don't want to touch it because easily over 90% of the Medicare overpayment fraud is non-whites. You'll get Nigerians, you get Mexicans coming up here, and they open these things, and again, it wasn't rare to run across $1 million account. These people are getting rich off of that scam. And it's just so easy, and it should be easy to stop, but they don't. Because they'd be arresting tons of non-whites, and it would look bad.
But if we did that, it'd look really good to arrest some white people.
Well, right,
especially some white nationalists.
Yep. They make an example every now and again, but yeah, I mean, it largely goes ignored, and they're back to wherever they came from, and then the accounts just get closed out.
I'm just saying we can't. This is not a kind of scam that we can get into because we would be very attractive targets.
Oh yeah, and I mean, really, where are we going to go? I mean, and if we went to a different country, they probably extradite us anyhow back here. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. Have you heard of Stefan Molyneux?
Yeah, but I don't know what about him. What about him?
Well, what's interesting is I was listening to one of his shows like years ago, and he actually had a person that did the same job as me, and he was telling the same story. And I'm like, oh man, finally someone gets it. And Molyneux said, well, what would you say the percentage is? And he's like, probably 90 to 95% are non-whites that are just absolutely ripping everyone off. And that's probably accurate. And the interesting thing about the 5% of those Medicare overpayment deals, they were legit mistakes. Every time I call up like a white owner, they'd say, oh, it was an accounting mistake. How do we get your money? And they'd pay right away. Like all those accounts, every white account that I called in that situation, they'd immediately send out a check. You get hold of the comptroller and they'd say, oh, sorry about that. Boom. And get paid. But it wasn't the other way for the other 95%. And again, it's billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. Have you ever, another scam, and again, sorry, this is your show. But
no, it's your show. You're the star today. You are totally the star today.
Are you familiar with the Pigford lawsuit or the Pigford settlement? Oh man, you got to read about that. That will make your head explode. In a nutshell, it was a Jewish attorney that ended up gathering up a bunch of black farmers to get them to claim that they weren't getting loans because they're black. And there's like literally no proof that they're being discriminated other than, there's disproportionate whites or whatever getting it and they're under. Well, I can tell you why, their credit sucks. Like every one of them. Again, out of the hundreds of thousands of credit bureaus I've looked at, I've never seen a black credit bureau that was even remotely good. So that's why they were likely washing out there. I mean, there was no discrimination in this case. I mean, it was absolutely clear. The thing that you're going to laugh about is that all these.
I've been laughing at a lot of things, actually.
Another thing that will blow your mind is that all these blacks that were going to claim damages, everything was past the statute of limitations. They were all past the statute of limitations. So then this attorney said, okay, we're going to file, but if the government raises a statute of limitations defense, then you're racist. And so the government didn't dump the cases off of the statute of limitations. I mean, that's the first thing you do.
Now, can you prove any of that in writing? Do you have documents that say that?
Oh, there's tons of look up. I mean, there's tons of stuff. Look up the Pigford Settlement. Yeah, it's famous. And in fact, when Obama
came
in,
where was it?
I don't know what the initiating
Pickford, you're saying like Mary Pickford.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a class action. Just put Pigford 1 and 2 settlements.
Pigford or Pickford? C-K or
like a pig. Oink
okay,
oink.
Pigford. Pigford Settlement. Okay, yeah, I've never heard of it before.
Oh yeah,
The
absolutely amazing.
Pigford case is USDA settlement of discrimination. Pigford v. Glickman was a class action lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Agriculture, alleging that it had discriminated against African American farmers in its allocation of farm loans and assistance from 1981 to 1996.
So am I checking out so far?
You are. I'd never heard of this.
Oh man, well, of course they wouldn't want anyone to know about it because it was an absolute scam, and it leads to why all these other race hustlers like Benjamin Crump and everything are popping up because they can bully these cities and everything to settle these cases with these blacks because they either don't want riots or whatever, but they could easily win these cases.
It's worth reading the Wikipedia 1 or 2 paragraph entry on the history of African American agriculture in the U.S. And I quote, Africans and African Americans have a long and rich history in the United States. The Atlantic slave trade brought over crops such as yams and okra that became popular in American diets and the farming practices to produce them. Enslaved people taught colonists and natives how to farm various African crops, which were fundamental for the establishment of New World societies. Many enslaved peoples in the Americas had the freedom and responsibility to control some of their diet by hunting, fishing, and farming. Some slaves were. I mean, what does this have to do with the case at all?
I was just about to stop you and say, what are you reading?
This is
nonsensical
Pigford v. Glickman
preamble.
in Wikipedia. This is the background to the case in Wikipedia.
Yeah, no, I mean, you'll read. I mean, again, look at it. You'll see that they could have claimed statute of limitations on it and got it dumped right away. But no. It cost taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. On top of that, then Obama came in, and again, this was supposed to be just for black farmers. Obama came in and said, "Oh, by the way, if you missed the cutoff for the Pigford 1 settlement, we're going to sign into legislation an extension." And they called that the Pigford 2 settlement, where, did we not advertise well enough? So come one, come all, and they extended it to basically all non-whites. And it was just apply for this thing, and they just threw money everywhere. It's the most repulsive.
But you had to prove you were non-white, I take it.
I don't even think.
Did you have to prove that you? Did you have to prove that you ever owned a farm?
Well, that's it. I think I think the standards, and again, I haven't. I've listened to credible sources talk about this part, to where all you had to do is like prove that you had like a home garden, and you would qualify for something from the settlement. I mean, it was the most absurd thing I've ever read, but I would have to say that the what was it, the Pepsi Harrier settlement, that was the funniest case I've ever heard of. But you familiar with that one with the Harrier jet?
No, I'm not. You're like a CLE course. Go ahead.
Okay, so I believe it was Pepsi. They had this deal where you'd get like Pepsi credits or something like that, and then they'd have you could buy, kind of like the cigarettes where you could get jackets and stuff like that. Well, sure. They would have these different things that you could buy with the credits. Well, then they had a parody that, okay, if you have 5 million of these credits, you could get a Harrier jet. And some dude was like, well, wait, he did the math. And it was like, wait, this jet's like $30 million. I would only have to buy like 10 million, and I'd be able to get this jet so I could flip it. And he ended up getting people to invest in it, and ended up saying, Pepsi, I want my jet. I want a military jet, and it better have missiles, damn it.
And what happened with that?
Well, so Pepsi gets sued, and they're arguing, well, no. I mean, it was a parody, so that's how parody in contracts ended up, to where it's like, if it's obviously a parody, then that was like kind of the seminal seminal case that established that out of contracts, where if it's an obvious parody, which I don't know. I mean, if I was a judge, I don't know if that would be an obvious parody or not. It's like, well, where was it? Where's the parody in this?
My
You had it.
God.
Did you find the case?
Yeah, I did. Leonard v. PepsiCo, 88F Sup. 2nd, 116 Southern District of New York, 1999, affirmed. Second Circuit, year 2000, 210F 3rd, 86. Widely known as the Pepsi Points case, is an American contract law case regarding offer and acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so they said
I remember this judge. The opinion was written by Kimba Wood, who was one of Clinton's. She was called. She was I think the only person who had ever been a Playboy playmate to be nominated for the Supreme Court.
Oh, fascinating. My literature teacher was a Playboy playmate in high school.
Oh wow!
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Oh God! But in 1996, PepsiCo began a promotional loyalty program in which customers could earn Pepsi points. These points could in turn be traded for physical items. A television commercial for the loyalty program displayed for commercial protagonists flying. The commercial protagonist flying a McDonnell Douglas AV-8B Harrier II vertical takeoff jet to school, valued at $37.4 million at the time. Oh,
that was close. That was close.
That is wild. Could be redeemed for 7 million Pepsi points. The plaintiff, John Leonard, discovered a loophole in the promotion, allowing him to purchase Pepsi points at 10 cents per point. Leonard promptly delivered a check for $700,008.50 to PepsiCo company attempting to purchase the jet. PepsiCo initially refuted Leonard's offer, citing the humorous nature of the offer in the advertisement. Leonard then sued PepsiCo in an effort to enforce the offer and acceptance perceived by Leonard to be made in the advertisement. In her judgment, Kimba Wood sided with PepsiCo, noting the frivolous and improbable nature of landing a fighter jet in a school zone.
You got to give it to the kid. I mean, that was clever.
Oh my God! Well, anyhow, yes. So we're almost out of time. But just summarize. What do you do exactly right now? What kind of work do you do?
Well, I'm kind of up to my neck in personal lawsuits. So I've found that the world we live in is so off the scales corrupt, and like companies and government constantly. They prey on people that are too intimidated to fight back, and it's a shame. I wish, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, to where the legal system's a racket. You got, I mean, even down to let's use a bunch of Latin phrases to intimidate people, make it seem like you need some sort of voodoo magic to practice law. So there's a lot of funny business that goes on with that, and a lot of people are intimidated to enter the legal field. Well, when I was going to law school, imagine this: I started bumping heads with my law school, and ended up parting ways with them.
Where did you go to law school?
Oh well, we'll keep that under wraps a little bit. But I ended up, well, people could probably find out. I ended up suing them, and yeah, well. It worked out for me. We'll put it that way. And then I found at that point, I think the first case I ever filed was against a pawn shop through conciliation court, commonly known as small claims. And that was over a power of attorney that they weren't respecting for a buddy of mine that had pawned stuff off, and then he went to jail. I'm like, I'll just sign the power of attorney. I'll take care of it. Ended up going to small claims, and I mean, it worked out. I'm like, I mean, at least at that stage, I was like, this isn't this isn't a space shuttle launch. I mean, they make the
Definitely.
legal profession seem like you need everything absolutely perfect all the time. I mean, half the judges don't even know what they're doing. And the rules themselves are, they're kind of loose, and well, there's discretion behind all of them. So, I mean, once again, it's like, well, close enough. We'll just let whatever slide. And they're generally pretty lenient for pro se litigants. So then started going a little bit more, had a case that kind of launched the whole thing. I'm like, okay, I'm digging into this. And it just, again, like I said, there's just everything everywhere. If you start paying attention, you understand tort law and a lot of federal statutes that apply to just about everything. I mean, I think I rattled off a bunch of stuff. I mean, just debt collectors calling you or something like that, or some telemarketer calling you past whatever time. And I mean, there's a lot of those statutes that offer statutory damages or exemplary damages. And so that it was just like the first lawsuit that I filed that actually was in Wisconsin, in Dunn County. In fact, they made a news article. You can still find it, Scheffler versus Dunn County. And it was over an open records request, which is another thing that governments just hate to do. They hate transparency. So they'll do everything possible to get around these things. And you can always jam them up, which a lot of those statutes actually have damages too. But yeah, so then it just kept going, and I just keep busy that way. And I mean, you can make money.
That's awesome. And so you say you're involved in personal cases. These are cases that you handle on assignment. Then you have people assign the cases to you, or how do you do it?
No, I just run into things half the time on my own. I mean, it's
okay.
Like,
so you're just... Well, we're out of time today. Troy Scheffler, it's a pleasure meeting you. Pleasure having you.
Well, the pleasure was all mine.
And signing off on December 26th from New Orleans and Brainerd, Minnesota, you said?
Yeah, close enough. It's been a pleasure, and time went way too fast.
We will be talking again very soon.
I hope so. That'd be great.
Good night.
Good night.
Sure. Our concluding music is the Flying Dutchman. I see myself and all my guests as like the Flying Dutchman sailing off into the dark sea.